Welcome to Lesson 5 by Chess Achieves. In this lesson, we'll be learning about the three special moves in chess. The three special moves are castling, en passant, and promotion. These are the only unique moves there are in chess that are unrelated to how pieces normally move. So we're going to start right away by talking about castling. Castling involves just two pieces, the king and the rook. Castling is the only time you get to move two pieces of the same color that are on the board. In order to castle kingside, which is the side of the board where the king starts on, which would be the files E through H, would be the king side of the board, you would simply move the king 2 squares and bring the rook to his side. This is the only time the king gets to move 2 squares. Normally the king can only go 1 square in any direction. In order to be able to castle, it has to be the first time the king and the rook are moving. It can't move in any other direction and then castle later. It has to be the first time you move the king and the first time that you move the rook that you castle with. Again, castling king side, you move the king 2 squares to the right and bring the rook to his side. For castling queen side, which are files A through D, that's the queen side of the board. Castling queen side, again, the king moves only 2 squares, in this case to the left, and the rook will come to his side. So castling queen side, the king moves 2 squares. Castling king side, the king moves 2 squares. So normally the king can only go 1 square in any direction, but for castling, one of the 3 special moves in chess, the king can move 2 squares and the rook comes to his side. Few special occasions when you cannot castle. We already talked about it has to be the first time the king moves and the first time the rook is moved at any point during the game. Nor can you castle if you're in check. If your king is under attack, there are only 3 ways to get out of check: capture, interpose, and move. Castling is not one of the 3 ways to get out of check. So if your king is in check, you cannot castle to get out of it. You can also not castle if a square that your king would move through is under attack. In the example shown here, the black bishop on B5 is attacking the F1 square. This is preventing the white king from castling king side. Assuming that the king hasn't already moved and wanted to castle on this turn, the only way that he could castle is to the queen side. He could not castle to the king side because of the bishop attacking the F1 square. So you cannot castle through check or into check. You cannot castle if you're in check to begin with at all. And you cannot castle if you've moved the king or the rook that you wanted to castle with at any point during the game. It has to be the first time the king moves and the first time the rook is moved for that game. En passant is the next of our 3 special moves. En passant is French for in passing. And the rule is created so that 2 pawns can never pass each other without one of them having at least had the opportunity to capture the other. In order for en passant to work, it's a battle only between 2 pawns. It's only between pawns, and no other pieces can do en passant. It's a battle between a white pawn and a black pawn. En passant only becomes available if one of the players jumps 2 squares, skipping a square, and their opponent's piece has the ability to capture the square that was skipped diagonally, just like a pawn normally captures. So in this particular example, the black army is about to jump 2 squares, skipping the F6 square. Notice that there's a white pawn on the E5 square that could go diagonal and capture using en passant to remove the black pawn. It's the only time in chess a piece captures an empty square and removes a piece off of another square, and it's only a battle between pawns. Both armies have the opportunity to do this to the other army. The option for en passant is a one-turn option. In other words, the white army has to capture on the very next turn in this example. Otherwise, en passant is not available. You have to capture on the very next turn when the opportunity is presented. It's only when one army jumps 2 squares and the other army is in the correct position to capture diagonally to the square that was skipped, only the square that was skipped, and remove the piece. En passant is one of the most confusing aspects about chess. Many people that have been playing chess for a number of years are not very familiar with the tournament rule of en passant, but it is a legal part of chess, and you should incorporate its understanding into your gameplay and be prepared to see it at tournaments. The final special move in chess is called promotion. Promotion, just like in life, in chess is causing a higher rank. When a pawn moves to the opposite side of the board, in this case for the white army, they'd have to go to the 8th rank, and they move their pawn forward, it gives them the choice of 4 different pieces to promote to. The pawn could be converted into a queen, a rook, a bishop, or a knight. Most people intuitively will select the queen, being the most powerful piece on the board, as their promotion piece. But in not all situations is the queen the best choice. Thought should be considered before selecting your promotion piece. Sometimes a knight or a rook or a bishop could be the best choice. By selecting the queen, it immediately becomes in play. So as you push your piece to the final rank, you would take it off the board and select your promotion piece. In this case, we've selected the queen. The queen now is creating check on the black king. The black king would have to respond as the piece is in play. Note that you cannot promote a pawn to a king. That's not allowed. Nor can you leave it a pawn. You must promote it to one of the 4 pieces when pushing it to the final rank. Both armies, of course, have the option of promoting their pieces. Promotion is a very powerful part of a game of chess. In the example shown here, it's the black army's turn, of course, because the black army is in check, and they have to get out of check. The white army is threatening to promote its pawn on the A8 square. So the black army has a choice. It could run away from the pawn that's about to be promoted, or it could stand in front of the pawn and block its path. This would be the correct line of play, as it will result in stalemate or draw depending on white's next move. But the important concept here is don't let your opponents promote their pawns into queens or rooks. This is a very dangerous combination for you. Try to stop your opponent's pawns from getting promotion. As a recap for the day, there are 3 special moves in chess: castling, en passant, and promotion. Castling involves the king and the rook. The king goes 2 squares and the rook comes to his side on the same turn. You can castle both king side and queen side. You cannot castle to get out of check. You cannot castle through a square that's under attack. You cannot castle if your king has moved. It has to be the first time both the king and the rook have moved for that game. En passant is a battle between 2 pawns of opposite color. In order to perform en passant, your opponent must jump 2 squares, skipping a square, and your pawn must be in position to capture the square that it skipped, but only if your opponent's pawn jumped 2 squares. If your opponent's pawn only went 1 square, en passant is not an option. Additionally, if you want to perform en passant after your opponent has jumped 2 squares and you have a pawn in the correct position to capture diagonally for the square that it skipped, you must do it on the very next turn. It's a 1-turn option to do en passant. If you don't do it on that turn, you cannot do it, but definitely take your time in making the decision on to do it. Just because it's available doesn't mean it's a good move. Promotion is a very powerful way to add a piece to your game. As you push a pawn to the opposite side of the board, for the white army, this would be getting one of the pawns to the 8th rank. For the black army, it would be getting a pawn to the 1st rank. If you can get a pawn to the opposite side of the board, you can promote any pawn to one of 4 pieces: a queen, a knight, a rook, or a bishop. Those are additional pieces, so you could have up to 9 queens if you promote all of your pawns into queens and the one that you started with. You could have up to 10 rooks or 10 knights or 10 bishops if you promoted all your pawns into the same piece. These are additional pieces, not pieces that have been captured. If you run out of pieces because your set has a limited number of pieces to promote to, you can lay a pawn on its side and tell your opponent what piece it is, and both players have to remember what that is going forward. Promotion is a very powerful part of the game. You should try to get promotions. Try to stop your opponent from getting promotions, as it can quickly imbalance the game in the favor of the person who got the promotion.